to A Stab in the Dark. It's a horror movie podcast where every couple of weeks we take a look at a classic horror movie. This week we are devouring, yes. Three Extremes, released in 2004. It's an anthology movie with three different stories within the movie. It's very interesting. This is Asian horror. It's very different to what we've done in the past, and it's very new for me, which is part of its charm, I think.
I'm very excited.
It's quite interesting, actually. Yeah. I don't know whether you've seen any
really new,
Asian horror.
Really new for me. So
it's quite a good showcase, kind of an introduction.
Yeah, to three different cultures. You could argue some of them aren't the best
representatives. But I think that you get something. There's something out of each of them. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and we can maybe make some recommendations based on what you like at the end.
For sure. For Joe and the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have Dumplings, we have Cut, and we have Box as our three films within this. And do you have anything of the background, Dave? Anything out there that you'd like to say before we delve into the...
I know a tiny bit, but not very much at all. But this is actually the second iteration of this idea.
Right.
The original one...
it's called Three.
Was just called Three,
but actually, bizarrely, it's now marketed as Three Extremes.
Yeah, so outside of Asia, it was released later.
Did I get the right DVD?
Yeah,
or have I been watching something? It's
going to be a very bizarre segment, if so.
Yeah, so I think the original one, filmed in 2002 but released later, like 2005 or something. I think outside of Asia.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult to get the distribution dates for outside of
but that was
it's quite good as well. Have you seen it?
I have. I don't remember very well.
It's not as good as this, but it's worth a watch.
So this one is the first one is Hong Kong, then South Korea, then Japan. And the original one is I think Hong Kong, South Korea, and Thailand, I think. So maybe we can come back and watch that one at some point.
And those are basically at least in the early 2000s, the hubs of Asian horror, right? If you add Thai into the mix with Shutter, which was massive at the time, you've got the four big hitters there.
It's interesting this and opens with Dumplings, which I think, am I right in saying, is actually a full-length feature film as well?
That's right. Released later that year.
Right. Yeah, so as I understand it, it was originally like a feature-length film.
Oh, right, and it was edited down.
And it was edited down for this, and then released unedited as a full film. So the shots in this are exactly the same as the shots in the full film that was released later.
I have seen that, and my personal view would be it's no better than the segment in this. So you don't necessarily need to watch. I mean, you can if you want for completion, but it's the same story. It's the same thing as this.
There are one or two points that are kind of glossed over in this version that are slightly more fleshed out, but it doesn't really change the core story or especially the core theme.
And I'm not
story.
sure that the idea justifies the runtime for a feature length for that short story.
It's pretty much. It's pretty much like.
I like it as it's 40-minute.
I think it's very good.
Yeah.
As a short movie.
The perfect length for one idea, which is what it is.
So let's delve into each one. We'll start with Dumplings, but don't give away if it's your favourite or not. We'll leave that to the end, whichever one might be. But what did we all think of this? Mike, what did you think of Dumplings?
I think it's pretty good. I mean, it's basically like a morality tale. How far you're going to go to, make yourself beautiful as a woman. Also a comment on the importance of that for a lot of women as well. I think it's maybe even for the 40 minutes, it's a bit overstretched personally, but it is very good. It's very well shot. I love the sound design and the soundtrack for this one.
Very industrial, isn't it? In some places,
especially towards the start. There's like a grinding noise repeated, which is very good. The crunching of the
eating and the crunching.
The dumplings is quite powerfully put offish, standoffish. The acting's quite good. It's obviously a bit difficult to gauge acting when it's in a different language, but it seems very believable to me. It seems I like this one. This is one of my one of my favorites. I'm not going to say if it is
one of your favorites out of the three.
Yes.
Perfect.
That basically means it's not at the bottom. Yeah.
What about you, Dave? How did you go with this?
I feel very much the same way. I was happy with the length overall. I didn't. I did actually source the full version to watch for this, but actually after having watched the short version of it, I felt that it was complete.
It feels not necessary
by
to
itself.
me.
Yeah. I didn't note it down, but I found it very interesting that despite being directed by a man, Hong Kong director Fruit Chan, it was written by a woman.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Maybe you can look up the name because I didn't write it down.
Yeah.
But like it's very very cool to have a female voice come through so strongly. And like I mean this theme.
That's quite interesting because I looked into the director's other movies and he hasn't really made any other horror movies. But if the writer is a woman and she's got horror ideas,
Lillian Lee. Lillian Lee is her name.
Yeah. And it felt like a very authentic voice coming through in the story. Are we like going spoiler free at the moment or just
no spoilers throughout?
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I felt that the kind of mystery of the dumplings was established very well, very quickly.
Yeah.
Like I think like from the very first scene, you get the sense that okay, there's some taboo meat in here, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't actually remember.
It's also kind of foreshadowed to the main character before she's surprised by the reveal.
Oh yeah, because
she asks what would be more potent, and the woman supplying the dumplings basically says like, oh well, if we went for 5 months in, that's more.
I think that she already
kind of knew
that there were fetuses,
but didn't really have it visualized in her mind. Yeah.
I also got the sense because she's an aging actress, right? The main character. And so of course it's like a comment on like aging beauty.
I was
standards.
thinking about the substance.
That's
out. There's definitely parallels.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the substance. Yeah. But I got the sense, but presumably she lives like quite an upper class life, like a quite wealthy life.
Yeah.
And she was out of place in their neighborhood at the beginning, going to go see Aunt May. Is that her name? I think so.
Sorry, I'm just thinking of Peter Parker.
Yeah. She goes to Brooklyn.
Uncle Ben.
Pizza time.
But to be honest, like I got the sense that she knew that it was transgressive already. That she knew more or less.
She must have got
like she
found
must have
out
heard
about
words.
it through hearsay.
Yeah.
You can imagine it's like a beauty secret that goes around circles of women. Like you can just imagine,
which is the kind of thing that happens a lot in reality, right? Like fad diets and like special drugs that you can take for slimming purposes and this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think the fact that she was there already speaks to her desperation immediately and how important it is to her. Like I don't think that the quote unquote twist ending. Or the reveal of the
I would
ending.
argue
maybe it's not a twist. Like the reveal of the ending is foreshadowed immediately in her character. It's very consistent, I think. How about you, Joe?
Yeah, for me, I really enjoyed it actually. It was when you're not used to a style of cinema, it's a very new culturally to me to watch something like this. But I enjoyed it straight away. There's some universal themes of aging in there, of being a middle-aged woman within that story is something that is more prevalent now within our culture. We've spoken about that when we did The Substance, when we reviewed that and watched it. But what I find interesting, if you put it in within that time, what I knew at that time, a lot of it is like, you remember like size 0 was a thing then?
Yeah.
For women, this was the era of like stick insect models.
Yeah.
This was that peak time for that sort of thing. So it's interesting that this came out within that time frame. I mean, this is the same era as not a very good film, quite obviously, but Catwoman, the concept of that cream being anti-aging, but it actually...
I love that you've chose that movie.
Yeah.
It's quite fitting, to be fair. Like,
I'm not arguing that it isn't, but
those themes are within that, right?
Yeah. Let's not forget that Western beauty standards have moved on from that, but a lot of Asian countries are still regimented in the thin is better.
Absolutely.
Thing to this day.
And there's also white is better too. That's the thing.
Yeah,
that
or
is
pale.
Still pale and white that is a sign of beauty.
Or like Western eyes kind of thing.
Yeah, sorry, I wondered how you were going to do that.
Whoa, get us cancelled.
What accusations are you making? Yeah.
He's going to bring out the flappy.
Going to go Krusty the Clown. Yeah. But like, it's a thing even to this day that when they advertise makeup or beauty products in Asia, Japan primarily, but it also happens in Korea and Singapore and stuff.
Yeah.
But they use white models for all of the advertising, which has an effect on.
It was definitely in Vietnam when I was in Vietnam recently. There was you see the women, they dress up like with the big conical hats on. They've got their whole face and long sleeves, even in like 40-degree heat.
Oh, to protect them from the sun.
Yeah, or about like 110 if you're in Fahrenheit mode. Is this huge? Like they're just wearing all this stuff, and they don't like go in short sleeves until the evening when the sun goes down. Because if you have pale skin, you're seen as more beautiful.
It's the same kind of thing that used to happen in England and Europe. Because if you had pale skin, I don't know whether it's specifically tied to that, but it may be still.
But tanned is.
It means you have to work out in the field. You have to work
exactly. You're a labourer
for a living.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I really did enjoy this. It's interesting on the DVD extras. They do a little bit of the making of and where it came from. And I think that actually the filmmaker himself, Fruit Chan, is thinking of this differently to what Lillian Lee is thinking.
Oh, really?
I reckon because it's from a male director.
Well, you think they're at war somewhat in the context of the...
but I think the perspective at that time of the male director is a little bit less nuanced and a bit more like, oh, she's a desperate. Like some of the comments made during that are like, Mrs. Lee is a typical pathetic woman. So he says that during
that's verbatim.
Yeah. That's from obviously from the subtitles. Yeah.
Were these interviews from the time, or were they like retrospective? From the time.
Yeah. And they're saying she's a lost middle-aged woman. There's this idea of like sickness, it's a extreme version of health and beauty, sickness in society. So there's less about the root cause of this,
like what would drive the woman. To do it in the first place.
And more about like they've done it as a take
like
on
condemnation of her.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's taking the person out of it as well, isn't it? It's changing it from personal just like a societal condemnation. Yeah.
So I think nowadays it would be a female director doing this. I think that's what would change. I'm not sure the actual direction would change much, but I think the actual driving force.
Well, I mean, the substance is a modern day interpretation of this exact same idea. And that's a lot more... Okay, it's a short movie, but it's not very character driven. You don't get to see a lot other than the fact that she's not pleasing her husband. You don't see a lot of her motivations for this.
And there's a huge... So they gush over the husband in this. So...
Yeah, and this guy's an asshole and he's cheating.
Yeah, big business guy.
Leave this guy. Don't change your body to suit him. Just leave this guy. Find somebody else.
You know, the director and all the actors, they love him. Like,
really?
Yeah. They're huge on him. They're like big him up, and he's sort of like, God, you get this guy, and he's with 1, 2, 3 women in the movie. I think that's the full length one.
To be fair, he is kind of a sexy silver fox man.
Well, absolutely.
But he's an asshole.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. I like its take on the fetishization of youth. It's that idea once again. Yeah. It's universal, right? In the whole of humanity, driving force of men looking for youth in a woman, and that is something that is probably never going to change in this world. Like it's a commentary on how we are.
Yeah, you're basically describing societal culture over time, though. I imagine when we didn't have a cohesive culture, that may have been different. Like we're brought up to think a certain way, and we're only shown sexy women of a certain age. We're predisposed to think that way about women. I think if society was built differently, if we had like a matriarchy where we had, like equally across the age groups presentation of women, we may not feel that way. I think to a certain extent we're taught that. Well, it's not instinctual. It's
not innate to humanity. It's like innate to society, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I could argue against that in the idea of even in like someone like the Bible, Mary is like 13 or 14 and Joseph is in his 20s.
But we already had a built-up male-dominated culture at that time, didn't we?
Yeah, but
that came from...
Yes, it didn't. But it didn't come from nothing. It came from an idea of what we once were, in a sense.
Yeah, but it came from the men being that. I mean, we're going on a tangent basically, but the men being in control, the ones with all the power, and they got to decide what was sexy and what wasn't, what was desirable and what wasn't, and therefore that became what women wanted, and what children being brought up, male or female, thought of as what was right.
Yeah,
what was better. Yeah,
it's interesting because aren't some of these things like animalistic? Isn't sex animalistic and attraction at the core of it, and we just layer our society above it?
Yeah, but sexuality is so complicated. I don't think we're predefined to like anything.
No.
Yeah, it's all down to how our experiences before our sexual age.
It is interesting though because there is something innate, right, about attraction, like sexual attraction. There's something in humanity about how that works, but it is interesting how that manifested in society at the beginning as being male dominated.
Yeah.
I don't think like that was the only way it could have gone, but it is fascinating. And even now, how many thousands of years later, now we're pushing back against that. Right. And now we're getting better representation of women in media.
But at the same time, it's difficult to fight something that's so traditionally baked into society. For a long time, religion was a core tenet of being in society,
but not,
and
it's not now.
Unraveling
it is
that,
changing.
Yeah.
Society is
and
not
hopefully
static.
we're unraveling from
because it's like attraction is embedded in humanity outside of society, but the way that manifests within society is not static. It has been static for a very long time, but it is changing.
But I doubt it's changing for much better than what has happened, because you've got the likes of your OnlyFans and the stuff like that, and pornographic material being so easily accessible.
Yeah, but that's empowering to women, or can be.
OnlyFans is at least.
Yeah.
I'm okay with
I disagree.
That. Yeah. I
don't agree with the concept.
Well, of OnlyFans?
No.
Really?
But it takes away from the predatory and horrible nature of the porn industry. It puts the money and the power in the hands of the women, and that's nothing but good.
Yeah, in some respects, but I don't think it's creating a very healthy society. And I think it's still leaning into the ideas of fetishizing youth. A lot of this stuff that is online these days is just what it was in a different form. And yet you're giving that power in, but you're also really, there's a lot of a serious undertone and underbelly within all this stuff, which is no good.
Yeah, but that was there before. I'm saying it's a good step in the right direction.
I would disagree with you. And I disagree that it's good, that because it's good for women, that's good for society. I don't agree. I disagree with the idea because I think it's bad for men on that respect as well.
But men weren't the ones being victimized by the porn industry.
I agree. I agree with you there, but I don't agree with this idea that...
I don't think that we could say that men were victims.
I'm not saying that either.
Of OnlyFans. It's...
No, I disagree, because there's all sorts that's happening these days with addiction and sex addiction and porn addiction.
But that's not... I mean, yes, it happens with porn, but that happens with everything. Like mobile games do the same kind of predatory.
Yeah, they shouldn't be there either.
That's a regulation of expenditure problem rather than a problem with OnlyFans itself. Like everything nowadays, because of capitalism, is just inching money out of people and looking for the whales that will just ruin all of their. Spend everything they can on this thing that's roped them in. Yeah,
I just think we're at the dawn of a new issue in our society. And we're only just coming to it now. And I think the internet has a huge
the internet has transformed society in a way that we're still barely coming to terms with.
We're learning to adapt.
Yeah,
and we'll be dead before.
It's for the better.
We're still reeling with. Sorry to interrupt you, but we're still reeling from the internet. But we're just scratching the surface with AI as well. Like again, like these things are gonna like irrevocably change society again, and probably not for the better, as you say. But I do, I'm not so pessimistic. I do believe that good things have happened, and I do believe that society can change for the better also, because I think that like mainstream media representation of women is getting better. Yes, there are now further avenues that allow like the continued fetishization that you were talking about of beauty. But at least those avenues are less predatory in the sense that it's those women able to.
You don't think that's damaging to them? Like the fact that you get all these success stories and only the winners get to tell their story. Only those who have been successful on these platforms telling their story. For every one woman that has done well on OnlyFans, 1,000 others have failed, and those.
Yes, but you could have said that exact same story about the porn industry before.
True.
Where they were roped into to situations they didn't like, were contracted to things that they didn't necessarily think that they were agreeing to.
Yeah.
They're not being taken. If anything goes wrong, or anything they don't want to happen, it doesn't happen now. Or at the very least, it's their choice for anything to happen that happens. They at least have the power to control. They're not being abused directly by anyone that's hiring them for these things. And I think for that sheer point, it's a step in the good direction. It's the same. It's the exact same argument I would give for legalization of prostitution, right? Like, it means that the woman providing the services is in control of the services, and no man should be in control of a woman providing those services, because that's abusive. That's wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else to say about?
No, I just I respectfully disagree.
Fair enough.
No.
Yeah.
Before we move on to the next story, can I share my final note?
Yeah.
Wow, being fed water like a bird is very sexy. I was watching it and I was like, whoa, this awakens something.
That was not sexy, man.
It was really sexy. I liked it.
Water landing on that.
Oh, it was good.
It was good. I think, we're going off on a tangent again, but I think spit is the most disgusting thing the human body produces.
No.
Oh, sorry, Vince McMahon over here.
I fucking hate spit, man. If someone spits at me, it's going to make me angrier than anything in the world. I'm not going to be sexualized at all. Yeah.
All right, let's
go. How do you follow?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think it's interesting that talking about dumplings led to what we've talked about, because I think that shows how interesting and you can make this film and turn it into something. I think that's the beauty of this medium.
There's substance there, right? There's a message that it's trying to communicate.
Yeah. I would argue that in terms of morality, it's interesting as well, before we move on. Because these are unwanted pregnancies or failed pregnancies these fetuses are coming from. So technically, there's no harm.
But it does like lead to the death, like of that young girl, right? She has the abortion too late and dies, right? That's how I understand that.
But that's not inherently because she's making the dumplings with the fetuses. That's because of the decision to make the abortion
there is a take
at the
on
time that it's made.
Well, yeah, but she's operating. She's collecting the fetuses from the hospital, but she's clearly doing like something on the side, like providing the service, presumably, to people that you wouldn't be able to get it done elsewhere.
Yeah,
like she's taking.
That's the point where it becomes immoral.
Yeah, but like that's like a consequence of the kind of the morality boundary that she's crossing, is that she also does this on the side, and it gives people this opportunity to endanger their lives.
Yeah, and when she's got customers begging for like the most potent thing,
eventually
drives
it's like
towards the the most immoral way of getting.
Well, it's a bit like, how in a way, like, drugs themselves aren't necessarily
it's definitely
immoral,
a lot
but the
like
crime
the drug
around
trade.
it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, actually, the drug connection is
I
quite
think,
good.
unfortunately, addiction leads you down those roads, leads down further in a path that you cannot escape. And I think this is an addiction she has to these, to youth.
And actually, now I've thought, I didn't bring this thought along, but now that we've mentioned the drug trade, that is very
it fits
interesting.
well,
because,
doesn't it? Yeah.
I had a point there. Basically because she's looking for the most extreme thing,
pushing it.
She's she's
the next high,
driving it further and further, and because supply goes a way that it does, it ends up hurting the manufacturing process. The sourcing process takes advantage of people in desperation and need in order to fill the person just paying for the product. So I think there's definite drug trade parallels.
Yeah, I also hadn't thought of it before, but I think it actually is a really good connection, and it was the death of the young girl that made that click for me. Because like
the victims,
it's
of...
like indirect victims in a way, like as a consequence, all leading towards the demand created by.
You're not inherently to blame for those, but you're causing the industry that is to blame for those, which is quite interesting, actually.
I suppose I did think about this, and I was thinking, could you make an argument that this is a pro-life type of movie, or this idea of abortion is bad?
I don't
in this
think
scenario?
So,
no, I don't think so either.
Think so.
But I think that people could argue that.
You could argue it the other way, though, couldn't you?
Go on.
You could argue that, if you don't have the ability to go to a hospital and have an abortion, then you have one.
Yeah.
Like black market, and it's dangerous.
Yeah.
So you could easily argue it the other way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Very interesting. Right.
Yeah.
Let's. Any more comments actually on Dumplings?
No, I think that's everything. Yep.
Yeah, correct.
Cool. Right. Let's move on to the second film, Cut, and we've got director Park Chan-wook, who did this one, and it's his first horror movie.
And he's a fucking master. He's one of.
He's an absolute genius.
One of the best.
One of the
living
best
directors.
Asian horror movie directors there is. Yeah.
Yeah. Straight. One of the best.
So
directors.
he's done more since horror.
Thirst. He did.
Thirst is, if you remember, it was the vampire movie that was in my top 5 horror movies. He also did the Vengeance trilogy, which is not really horror, but the brutality kind of makes it horror adjacent.
And so, I mean, all three of them are incredible, but Old Boy is arguably one of the greatest films ever made, like ever.
Yeah, honestly, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, honestly, if someone said it was their favorite film, I'd be like, yeah. And there's only a very small number of films where, I mean, I wouldn't put it there, but like, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. All three are good. He also made Joint Security Area, which I recommend to everyone. Again, not a horror movie, but it's about like the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea.
Oh yeah.
And it's basically about there's 3 guards on either side who mostly spend their time like playing cards and drinking and doing whatever. And then for whatever reason, one of them has to go over to the other side to fetch something, and they start becoming friends and like hanging out on each other until authorities find out and things go sour. But yeah, I love that movie, and it's on the scene, and it's not horror, but I'm jotting it in there. But yeah, Chan-wook Park is amazing. Yeah.
Okay, we'll start with you, Joe. What did you think of this one?
I enjoyed the most of it.
Oh, you didn't like the ending?
I also don't like the ending.
I didn't like the ending.
As soon as it turns to, oh wait, has he lost his mind? I didn't like that bit. Yeah. The set design is amazing.
Yeah, set design's great. And I also really like the idea of him being the film director. I wasn't sure at first, because if you know my take on the meta thing at the moment, I was like, oh, this is kind of meta. They're doing a horror movie.
You were like second guessing.
But because that didn't define this, it wasn't a definitive part. The idea actually originally was that the character, the intruder, was the element he thought of first. The intruder in a rich person's house.
Is this behind the scenes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because this was written, it was also written by him, right? So again, like the first one, the voice I felt came through very clear, like with the main character being a director.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting.
But on the idea that...
Which is sorry, but just to jut in, which is interesting. Stephen King always writes his books where writers are the main character.
Yeah.
Why don't we get a lot of movies where the director is inserting the director?
Yeah,
that would be quite interesting.
They don't like very often write their own films, right? Like,
well, there's quite a lot of directors that
but
are writer directors.
Yeah.
Although
I'd like to see that more.
I do think you're overstating the film element within it, because the idea is the intruder going into a rich person's house who just is nice. And that was the idea. He then later added in, he actually says it doesn't really matter if he's a film director or not. They just added that in, I think, more for effect than anything else.
I mean, it makes an incredible opening sequence. It's like
exactly.
like a double reveal in a long take. I mean, that's my favorite sequence of all of three of them.
I have a little I just think some of it's dated a little bit with the cinematography of it, like going through the walls and stuff. I wasn't necessarily a massive.
Really? What you mean in the opening sequence?
Yeah, when they just go through the wall somewhere else. I was just like, yeah.
See, I don't
dislike it, but
I actually don't particularly like this one. This is my least favorite one. But I think the cinematography is one of the strongest parts about it.
I'm not saying the rest isn't. I'm literally saying that one section of it.
The bit where it's like following the long take, the thing that's attached to it.
Yeah, well, no.
The opening.
Oh, right, when it's panning through and you realise the cameras.
Yeah. I thought that was a bit goofy.
I like that.
That's how they do long takes. They stitch them together with stuff like that.
But they morph through a wall. Meh. And then I didn't like the quick take in the car when they go and they're in. It felt very 2000s and dated to me. But
I like. I mean, it is a little bit kind of like Guy Ritchie kind of style, like super stylization of the camera movement. But yeah, I like that.
However, that is my only gripe with that, because I think the rest of it is shot fantastically. That's the only bit there that took me out of it a little bit. But I enjoy it as a film. I think it's really good until the ending, and I think the ending kind of plummets it a little bit for me with that. I just think, oh, fuck you then. I just think a twist for the sake of a twist.
I also had that reaction. I didn't remember that.
Wait. What twist are you talking about?
Well, when he strangles his wife at the end.
Yeah.
And
why is that a twist?
Because he's been trying to save her. He almost tried to kill he almost killed the kid to save her. Yeah,
and then I guess the ambiguity is whether he's strangling her on purpose or he really has lost his mind. But either way,
exactly. That's not a twist.
Well, it is a twist.
No, it's not a twist.
It's an unexpected plot development.
In other words, a twist.
No, well, I mean, the text. I have a lot to say about this one actually, but the as it's presented in the film through they do like a reflection effect.
Mm-hmm.
I took that to be like something. He had a breakdown, right, and it inverted everything for him, and so he saw them as each other. That was how I saw that, and so I did read it as him legitimately having a breakdown and killing her by accident. However, like the reading that he's doing it on purpose, I think is also very interesting, because there's lots of because I found on my first watch, I liked this one more than the first one, but kind of concluded that there was less depth to it than the first one, which may still be true, but I think there's actually a bit more to this, I think, than maybe we're giving it credit for. It's very stylish. It's very well shot. I love the opening, and especially once he gets to the house. The lights go off. That sequence is very good. The lights come on, and it's the reveal. And then it's basically like a stage play then, with the two of them bouncing off each other. Brilliant. But there's little bits, like, for example, like he chooses the set of his film to match his house. And I was like, why is he doing that? I'm like, okay. And then on the second watch, I noticed that the vampire in his movie plays piano just like his wife. I'm like, interesting. So and she's a bloodsucker.
Yeah,
right?
she's feeding off his wealth. For,
yeah.
Plastic surgery,
and also like the way that the vampire kills. She's like drinking from the neck in the movie, and then that's how his wife kills the intruder at the end as well. Yeah. I was like, that's cool. Like, there's intention there. Like, and for that, I think the fact that it's a film director does work because he's able to put that in. And for me, like the bloodsucker subtext with the wife makes the ending more interesting as well. I thought that the intruder was actually quite scary in his like insanity and psychopathy and like the mundanity of him. And I also think, and for me anyway, I liked that. I don't know if you're necessarily supposed to necessarily agree with this point, but it's an interesting thing that I think about a lot, which is about like when life is easy for you and you're a nice person, are you a nice person?
Yeah, if it's easier to be a nice person, then
like
is it your choice?
And then when you have a horrible, shitty
Yeah.
life and it makes you a bad person, like, are you a victim?
Yeah, I think it's quite strong as a kind of thematic piece on morality and class and how those are related.
Yeah,
and I think it's shot very well as well. But I don't necessarily buy the ending like Joe doesn't.
I think
either way it's interpreted.
It cheats me of something.
I think it's a bit cheap and not very well handled.
How would you have done it? How would you have ended it?
Well, I mean, I'm not a film
No, of course not.
Writer,
but what was dissatisfying that you would like you would change? You wouldn't have him.
I don't like the ambiguity.
As to why he strangles his wife at the end.
Yeah.
And I think it's unnecessary harm on a woman. I don't think she's already been through so much. I'm like, oh, come on, you're like, this is just too much for me. And I also think
it was the violence against her that you had.
I didn't mind the violence that perpetrated by the intruder, but then the violence put upon her by her husband, who has just been trying to save her, and then does that. I mean, for me, what would have been better is if they did it like it was The Graduate and just left it up in the air. That the fact that she can no longer play piano, she's had an easy life. He has now said that he's been cheating on her and that he kind of just despises her in many respects. Just leave that hanging. Let us go, what would happen next in their lives if we were to come back in their lives?
I think showing it at the end is narrative whiplash. So you've got two choices, right? Either he's spontaneously insane, which I hate in all of its forms
ridiculous
in most
to
of
me.
media. I don't like that. I don't like suddenly telling me as the audience that I can no longer trust this person to think rationally and therefore they're going to behave in this way and I've got to accept it. And if it's him purposefully killing his wife, it doesn't make, unless he spontaneously again, and I'm supposed to believe that he spontaneously did it, decided to do it then, why would he try and strangle the child? Why would he give a shit about his wife any of the way through the short?
I think the stranger wins.
It's hard for me to believe
anyway.
either way.
I think the stranger wins because, he's already won if he doesn't kill the wife.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's like the point of the story. Like, he has destroyed both of their lives. He's corrupted them. And he wins. So you don't need that added.
Well, he's raging against the society,
the machine,
the system, the machine. Yeah, exactly. So just the mere fact that he has both of them tied up in a predicament is enough for him to have won.
Yeah.
Because his end goal is the death of his family and himself. Any discomfort or like problem that he causes in these rich people that he's jealous of and perplexed by his lives is a success for him. So
saying that though, I agree with almost all of your points except for maybe the end that I didn't like the ending.
I mean, to be honest, I actually would have preferred the Graduate style ending as well. Right. I do think it's my only criticism of that short overall is the ending. And like, I don't think I hated it as much as you two, but I do think it would have been better to leave it ambiguous, given all the revelations. As you say, the fact that the intruder dies at the end is actually relevant because he does win, as you say. But
and death is the final word for that woman. Then, like, they can't live out in our minds. we can't then live out a life where they then, what does she do next? Where does she go? She's had an easy life now. She doesn't.
Yeah.
But she's dead. That's it. That's the end note. And yeah, it's dissatisfying to me. Although I really like the idea you're talking about. Is he a victim? Is this stranger, this intruder, a victim? I saw him a bit like Frank Grimes. I saw him as grimy.
Grimy.
Yeah.
As he liked to be called.
Yeah. And I saw him a bit like that. And you can see how not being a success, or if you're an actor.
Yeah, he has a legitimate problem with his life. He's just misdirecting the blame and the anger towards someone else.
Although you could argue that person down on their luck doesn't then go out and kill their wife, kids, and strangers.
No. There's no defense for it.
So in that respect, he's kind of representing a disgruntled working class, but within a very extreme way. Like that doesn't necessarily mean that disgruntled working class are all going to overnight become serial killers. But I find the character extremely interesting because he's obviously quite talented in some respects. Like he can dance, he can sing, he can act, and he has a good brain on him. Like he has the ability to be successful, but he's hardworking and he's never made it.
But at the same time, he's pitiful, and he uses his background as an excuse for the bad things he does, not just to the the rich people, but to his son. Right? He says, "Because I was beaten as a child, that's made me into the person that beats my child." Well, if you've got the self-reflection to realize that, why can you not change yourself?
Yeah, and
why do you have to blame other people for what you yourself make as an action?
He takes zero responsibility for his actions throughout. It's like, well, this happens only because of this. I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for this. And at some point, you cross that line into actually, it is your fault. You're not a victim. So I would say not a victim. But also, kind of, if he doesn't do any
he
of
is
the
a
really
victim,
evil...
but he's using that victimhood to like exaggerate the harm he can do.
Yeah, I mean, there's no defense for your actions. Like, I mean, most serial killers have a terrible, horrible childhoods, right?
But if you know you have a problem, you don't take steps to, make the world like a victim of that problem.
And I don't know necessarily if the audience is supposed to agree with him necessarily, but it's just, like I say, just an interesting thing that I think about quite a lot. Like whether, are you still a nice person when things go wrong?
Yeah.
It's much easier to be a nice person when you're happy and when life is easier. That's,
Yeah. And if you have the freedom of choice to not like make your life more difficult by being the good person.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And I'm a big believer of nurture over nature, so it's very much determined on your circumstance, where you live, the people you know, whether you are a good person, and it's dependent on where you are, what a good person means in the first place. It's all massively subject to debate.
I don't necessarily believe that you are doomed to be in a certain, like, the nurture.
No, but it definitely makes it a more difficult road to being someone could describe as a good person. Yeah.
But, a lot of rich people really aren't nice people. Just this one in this character was. There's not that many really rich people who are good or wholly good. They may, on the surface, seem that way.
But I would argue there's not a lot of people in general, poor or rich, that I would possibly describe as wholly good people.
Well, no,
it's very difficult
because we're
be
humans, right?
Everybody's got flaws. Everybody's got dark and light.
Because just because the director is cheated on his wife doesn't necessarily make him a bad person. It just makes him nuanced and human.
It's a balance of how much good versus how much bad you inject into the world and the people around you. Nobody's inherently completely good, and it makes that point clear by the fact that the director does have flaws. Yeah, albeit they're small compared to the invader, but these are the kind of things that you would say if he cheated on his wife, even if his wife is cheating on him, it's still a bad person thing to do. It's still immoral. Even the like telling his actors not to work with another rival, that's a bad person thing to do. I mean, the invader writes it off because he's committed far greater sins, but if I was to hear that someone I knew did that, that's a bad person move. That's immoral to the point where I would think of them as immoral.
Yeah,
because that's pure selfish concern.
Well, there's also then maybe like this thing about idealization, where like the invader treats the rich guy who, you know, on his few interactions with the director were very pleasant, and the director surprised him with his niceness, and then idealized him in that way, and then didn't see him as a human being anymore, and then reduced him down, you know, as a perfect person and a rich man, and that's what
we have no idea of knowing how long he's been following the man, but it can't have been that long.
Yeah.
And you can't know the person inside out. You can only know on a surface level his actions. He doesn't know anything about this person. A person can be a bad person and not let it out into the world. They can think horrible thoughts, and they can be quite a hateful person, but restrain themselves to only do that when it's completely unseen. Morality is difficult. It can't be reduced to good man, bad man, which is part of the fallacy of the invader. He's looking at the world in a simplistic terms, purely to justify the way he lives his life and to blame others for the reason that he lives an immoral life. It has to be this black and white system, and it has to be he's on the bad side, and it's somebody else's fault that I'm on the bad side and he's on the good side. And why was I not given the good side juice that he was given? It's a simplification of morality that we as viewers aren't going to apply to these characters. But that's what it's playing with the dynamic, I think.
But the interesting thing about this film is there's quite a lot of content behind the scenes on this one, so it's quite cool. In one, who played the intruder, he said he always wanted to play a part like this. He'd never played this sort of devious character before, but he had to speak in a different dialect to his own. So he wasn't speaking his own languages. He's from Seoul, but he had to speak in I don't know how to say, Shangxian.
I don't know.
Well, anyway,
you
have to speak in that dialect, which is the director's dialect.
Yeah, I'm presuming in Korea, in a similar way to the UK, if you live in Seoul, if it's like living in London, right? You're probably more wealthy than if you live in wherever this place is.
Yeah. So it's interesting that actually he was quite on set. He was quite very professional, but very serious, because he was thinking about his performance a lot. He really wanted to make it work. So he had a lot of weight on his shoulders. So Kang Hae-jung, she is the marionette, the wife, and says Won Hee seemed tense throughout the shoot. He says as if a lot of weight was on his shoulders, and because he had to learn a lot, he did a whole month's worth of dancing lessons for that scene.
Wow, really?
And they filmed it in one go. So there's a really funny bit where they talk to the guy playing the director. And he basically does that scene. He's attacked because they want to do it in one shoot. He had to be in character while he was doing it, and he does this whole dance, this sequence, and it's really good. And at the end, he's like does the pose and goes next to him, and he just laughs in his face. And Lee Bang-han says that he felt so bad, and you can see him like because then they show it later on, and he sort of like kneels down, feeling terrible, and you can see the crew and cast going like, fuck, because they have to do it again, and there's this one take thing they're trying to do. So director Park Chan-wook, he says he wanted to make a horror movie. This is his first one, and it was this idea that years ago it was the rich who are evil, and that's kind of changed. So the rich now perceive themselves as good, and the working class. These ideas came from that, and the character.
I would argue that the rich have always perceived themselves as good.
Yeah, but I guess it manifests itself now that we have the media we do, and we have cameras, and we have different morals to what we did before, that perhaps they have to show themselves in a certain light to what they used to do.
Well, they have to hide their immorality more.
Would King Charles today be able to, I don't know, cut off the head of Camilla if he got pissed off with her, like Henry VIII.
Well, actually, we don't know. There might be obscure legal precedent for that
I'm
being
not
okay.
saying,
BBC.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that you wouldn't be able to do that and get away with it now, like in the public eye.
Because they're more in the public eye, they have to like.
Remember,
act upon it.
Queen Elizabeth II was the first monarch to be on TV regularly. Like,
she's
have
been
been
present
under the
themselves in a certain way and dutifully, more so than any other king or queen.
And they are the pinnacle of what we perceive as rich, aren't they? Like if we look at rich, they are the most. They really show themselves off in that way, and people are getting. I mean, look at the world today. Everyone wants independence from the empire. People don't want to have that association anymore. Charles and Camilla are going out to Australia soon, and there's a big call by the Republican base in Australia to have another referendum. Although they haven't really been doing that much wrong, but when they do lavish their kind of wealth on the world, say someone like Andrew, who does that through such diabolical means, and that he can get away with it because he's so rich in that way, we really hate that. We cannot stand that, and rightly so. We cannot stand that.
But that goes, that goes against it, right? Like he got away with it. He's pretty much not got any.
Well, he hasn't got away with it in the public eye. He'll never be part of the working royals again.
Yeah, but was he ever?
He's lost his standing in society.
Yeah, but it hasn't affected him.
Yeah, how will that? I think
that's
him?
Like not even a slap on the wrist. That's.
Yeah,
nothing.
but he's no longer anything, is he? All he's known as is a pedo. Like he's not known as anything else now.
I wonder how much that's actually changed his day to day. To be honest.
Yeah, I mean that seems a lot like that Zombieland gif where Woody Harrelson's dabbing his tears with the money. Like
yeah. But what are you like? This is the thing. What are you, unless whatever you are perceived as? There is nothing else.
But that is
you
a
are only
personal
perceived.
View. I personally don't hold a lot of stock on what other people think about me because I feel like I'm me and that's me. And I think it takes a whole other level to, because it would be changing me to care specifically about what other people like you two specifically thought about me, like you like me or you don't like me. But it's another level from that to think about or care about what strangers think about you. I find that a little bit extreme. I know there's a lot of people that do because social media is prevalent now and people give a shit about.
And what is a film like
profile.
Dumplings based upon of? What we perceive of others.
Yeah.
And what others perceive of us.
The insatiable need to present ourselves as the best version of ourselves, or not even the best version of ourselves, but the version that other people want of us, is a toxic kind of flaw in the way society is built up. And that's kind of a theme in both of the stories we've covered so far. Yeah. You need to be known as a good person or a beautiful person. Yeah.
And if you lose that standing in society, is that not the most gut-wrenching thing? Isn't that one of the leading causes of suicide within society? That losing of a social standing, losing of everything that you ever known, you lose your identity.
I mean, I said all I said just now, but at the same time, if you take it to an extreme point, so anyone, no matter who they are, if you're mistakenly outed as a paedophile in the media when you're not, and everybody around you distances themselves from you because this has been put about, you would very seriously think about suicide. I think anyone would, because if to such a degree you're not just not cared about, but you're actively hated by everyone around you. I think that's a tough pill for anyone to be able to.
In that scenario, then even if you're later proven innocent, it's like same as if you're.
It's a footnote in the news story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's never. I mean, the sensational headlines about Pete Townsend when that came out in 2003.
Yeah, there's still people that remark that.
There's still people in corners of the internet who say that, even though there was a found innocent.
Yeah, same with Cliff Richard, same with a lot of people who had their house raided. I mean, I'm no one to say justifiably whether they're innocent or guilty, but the fact that I feel that way, where I have that certain doubt, is a reason that people are always going to bring that up, even if it's unfounded.
So, yeah, I mean, in the Pete Townsend one, the newspapers didn't go off out and after the innocent verdict, when they took away his 20 computers and found nothing, they didn't come back and go, "We're so sorry, front page news. We're sorry to Pete Townsend."
The allegation is front page. The retraction is page 72.
The only thing that was able to come back at that was Roger Daltrey, also the big name from The Who, being able to go out there and actually creating a sensational headline by pointing out and vilifying the media for the way that it was perceived. So it took someone else then close to them to be able to then actually help clear his name and support him as a
I mean,
brother.
the media is another arm of the the ills of like social culture being adopted by all. The media has a duty to restrain itself and not act on pure sensationalism. Like, they have such an important job, and I mean, who am I to say this, I guess, but like, maybe don't think about the money, maybe think about the damage you're doing to society, and what this is going to do to culture as a whole, or just in general, if you're talking on a small scale, who you're writing about and whether it's founded enough for you to disparage their name, whether you've got your even facts correct, because like, we're quite strong in the UK in terms of like regulation of news media, but we still have problems with it, and there's places that have much worse problems with it. Like, America is very loose with that kind of shit. So, I don't know. Social ills.
Yeah. So, on a lighter note, the director name in this film is, I'm going to butcher a load of names now, so bear with me. But
we're going to hear Korean German.
But his name is Ri Ji-ho in this, okay? And that comes from 3 other directors' names. So you've got Ru from Ru Shangwan, and then you've got Ji from Kim Ji-hoon, and Ho from He Jin-ho. And,
are they all Korean?
Bong Joon-ho.
Well, Boon Joon-ho, we know.
Boon Joon-ho, there you go.
Yeah. We know him. I'm not
Go
sure
on then, why do we know him?
Well, he's the Parasite director, isn't he?
Well, I don't know.
Oh, no.
You're the expert. I know.
I might recognise some of the other names if I saw them written down. Are they all Korean directors?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably know them if I looked up their filmography, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, so he directed Parasite. You're right. So the name comes from that.
Cool.
So they come from all these different director names. So all of these, they pay homage. I mean, a lot of these, I think he might be the only
Kim
one.
Ji-woon one of them?
Kim Ji-hoon, yeah.
Yeah, so he's one of the directors of the original 3. And he's also the guy who did I Saw the Devil, Tale of Two Sisters.
Oh, right.
Bittersweet Life.
Yeah.
There you go.
Cool.
So, like, yeah, and then you've got the idea. Then that he's speaking this dialect. It was interesting, his speech and like all of that noise he was making in there. Like, that was really kind of like gritty. I really didn't like it when he was doing that. It's great for the story. I didn't like him doing it. The marionette that they did with the strings.
Yeah, I wish that
it was incredible.
Yeah, it was beautifully done, but I wish they'd done more with that, because the puppeteer never pulls the strings, does he?
No, it's not like Freddie got fingered.
Yeah.
Daddy, like some sausages.
It looked like a proto sword trap to me.
Yeah, I saw people in the reviews
calling it like almost torture porny.
Yeah,
I saw that as well. I don't really agree with that.
Somewhat. I mean, it's not, but it's somewhat Saw-esque.
Yeah.
Like, there's 50% of its DNA maybe is Saw. Yeah.
Yeah, but you can also see her being tied up like that as a kink. It could be some really dark, twisted kink of hers.
It's never used though. I feel sorrowful that like we got that beautiful image and then it doesn't go to any fruition.
Well, the image is definitely memorable though. I mean, I hadn't seen 3 Extremes since God knows when we watched it, and that was the only image of the whole thing I remember.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting.
That set like burned into my brain, and it is the only thing I could remember from all 3 of the stories.
This is my least favorite story, I think, but It's shot
at the end.
No, I'm not giving away the most, but like it's shot so beautifully well. All I could remember, because the last time I saw it was, I think, the second time when I watched it with you, like, I don't know, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
That was what I remembered most. The chessboard floor and the piano and that kind of thing. So it's got very strong imagery. Yeah.
But that's intricate detail. They show you threading it all through in the backstage stuff, and there's about 10 guys working on her all at once, like and putting all the wires up and wrapping them around her. It's really interesting artistry. Like, it's an incredible image. I'm just glad it's in there. All right. Any other questions? Any other thoughts on this one before we move on?
I don't think so. Not for this one. Nope.
All right. Let's move on then to Box.
Takeshi Miike.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, I wonder which one is Mike's favorite.
What are you talking about, man?
Well, what do you think of this one, Mike?
I love this one.
Yeah, of course you do. Of course you do.
I mean, I love Takeshi Miike. I think he's literally, if we're talking horror directors only, he's my favorite.
Well, all time. Oh, Asian
director. Okay. Yeah. I wasn't gonna Takeshi Miike above like John Carpenter, no. But like Asian directors, I love Takeshi Miike, and I think this one is, its use of sound is amazing. Like, its use of silence.
Yes. Very little dialogue in the whole thing.
It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
The whole thing is kind of like a dream state metaphor about the guilt of what happened in her childhood with her sister, wrapped up with the abuse from the father. And I think,
until it isn't. We talk about the ending in a bit, but
well, I think it still is.
Oh, really? Are you
interesting that you think that it's not?
Expand.
In what way is it not?
Where you think that the ending is a dream and not the literal ending of the film?
Well, it's all
remind people what the ending
right?
is. Remind everyone.
Okay,
when she's attached to the sister.
Yeah, when they're conjoined at the end.
Well, that's okay. Maybe that's not well. It's a fantasy, not necessarily a dream. But that's like metaphorically living with the memory of the sister, living with the buried past, resolved past. She's not waking up before it's buried anymore. She's not waking up before resolution. She saw the resolution, and now she's living with the sister in an amiable manner. She's no longer seeing the sister's memory as a ghost or a phantom or a threatening spectre that grows and looms larger and larger when it's spotted. It's a resolution presented in metaphor, but I think it's a resolution. Yeah, dream versus fantasy, fantasy versus reality is somewhat irrelevant at that point. I think the whole thing is so much of a mix between reality and fantasy and dreams. It's kind of irrelevant what's reality. It's all a presentation of her mind state and what she's thinking at the time. So I don't think that matters. I think it's just a very beautifully shot, artfully made, perfect representation of the woman's mind state when she had a traumatic experience as a child. I love this one. Yeah.
How about you, Joe?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I could watch it again and again and still not know what the fuck was happening. To be quite honest with you.
Yeah. It's somewhat cryptic in its presentation. Yeah. It doesn't spoon feed it, for sure.
I reckon this is what my mind thought of when I thought of Asian horror film.
All right.
I just think very artsy, very different, very unique, and not something you necessarily see in Western cinema. I liked, in a way, the simplicity of it as well, though. It's so simple. It's simply shot in many respects.
Yeah.
Like, there's not much dialogue.
It's what I admire. It's very simple, but it's all about the artful presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that. I mean, I liked that they used real world locations, like the snow was really it's really snowing. There's really a snow blizzard. they worked in that, and it adds that extra element of realism within this kind of interesting out there story which they're telling. But also the out there story, you could also see it is all part of Kyoko's mind. You can always see it as part of it happening in there. So, and the mind isn't structured in the same way a film is structured. So we're seeing more of the elements of her spill out onto our screens.
Yeah, it's almost Lynchian in its kind of dream state-y.
Yeah.
Everything's kind of a metaphor, fantasy. Read into it what you will. You get the core framework of what this woman's going through, but there's no hard and fast rule about whether anything that you see, whether that's actually what happened or if it's a physical, visual manifestation of what she's feeling. Yeah,
I reckon, like, right in they talk about this film and the actors don't know what the fuck is happening. Like when she's literally going, she's quite innocent. The main lead she's quite an innocent person, and she's quite, she comes across as if she's very new to the genre, and she actually doesn't think it's a horror film. She's saying, I didn't really see this as a horror film.
You could argue that it isn't.
Yeah,
I mean, I would argue that it is in the same way I'd argue every David Lynch movie is, but it's not.
Well, it's kind of life affirming, like I would say, the message at the end. Yeah. I mean, like,
but it's built for tension, and there's kind of a foreboding atmosphere.
Yeah, and it deals with dark subject matter.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's life affirming. I think. Like, I mean, you can call it a horror film. Yeah, like a David Lynch film, but I mean, I would say it's like the least horrific of the three, in my opinion.
It's the least extreme visually, but I would argue the most extreme psychologically.
Yeah, we're delving into this young woman's mind.
In terms of psychological horror, I think this is the strongest. This is the most impacting one, for me anyway.
Anyway, so she was saying during the filming, the script is very complicated. She said you couldn't just break it down into pieces trying to understand as you normally would with a script. And she found it difficult to understand because of the dream sequences and took it one scene at a time. So her performance is, in a way, she's not thinking of an overarching story. She's actually just living in that moment. I think that's an interesting way for an actor to look at something.
It actually works. I think,
exactly.
In the context of the...
I mean, and then saying about
she's supposed to be kind of lost in this nightmare situation.
Nightmare, dream, memory.
Yeah.
And he says that directing style that is very delicate, and he's very detailed and intricate with what he wants from his actors. And said I just enjoyed listening to his story and the direction he gives. He made me realize that I need to look into the deeper part, or that the simple fact that such depth does without doubt exist. So absorbing his world in me and trying to express it. So it's all from the mind of Takashi.
Yeah,
Miike.
I love Takashi Miike.
So, Miike. I'm just going to say Mike. Takashi Mike.
Excuse me.
Takashi Miike.
I love Takashi Miike. Like, yeah, man, we should cover more of his movies. Like,
I really want to audition.
Yeah, I need to revisit your audition because people shout that that's like one of the best horror movies of all time.
Yeah,
and I think it's good, but I don't know. I think he's done better.
What you're going to say with my butchering of these names is that I'm not used to these ideas. You only know his name because you like the movies.
Yeah, correct.
That you know about this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I feel like you'd be butchering it in the same way I would.
True. Well, I
just called him Takeshi Mike for years. I remember.
That's bullshit, man. I did
100%.
I did Japanese for 6 months at university,
and that makes it much worse. But 100%, 100%.
Takashi Mike. I did not say that.
Yes,
I just
100%.
No.
So I'm just giving myself a bit of like a break here.
Yeah, mate, 100%.
Well, that was when I was doing
because I feel like
Japanese.
a fool every time you say like Miike. I'm like, I don't know. I'm new to this.
Yeah. I mean, it happens a lot though. Like, there's a lot of not necessarily Japanese directors, but if there's like an Eastern European director, sometimes I'm just like, how do I say that? I'm gonna have to just hand wave it away. Yeah.
I mean, I think what we found. Anything else to say?
No, I've sung its praises basically.
Anything?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the best sound design, as Mike said,
McKay.
Yeah,
as McKay says. Yeah.
It doesn't have a single visual that's as striking as like the marionette set up in the second one.
No,
but the outdoor shots in the snow are the most beautiful shots of the three films, I think. I straight up didn't understand it on my first watch. I have to admit that. I just didn't understand it on my first watch.
I still don't understand it now.
Fair enough.
So
I didn't understand it.
It's a distorted narrative.
Yeah.
Kind of built.
Like, I understood it until the end. The end completely threw me for a loop. And that's why I was asking you about the ending.
When she wakes up from the dream.
Yeah, and she's conjoined, and I thought that was like my first watch. That was the reality of the film, and then I was like reflecting on how that.
Well, I mean, it's how you approach the material, right?
Yeah,
like
but that
if you're looking for reality rather than trying to judge it based on how the metaphor evolves.
Well, yeah, that's what I was struggling with. Yeah, but it was actually thinking about David Lynch, and you mentioned him as well. That made me understand that it was more of a
it's a representation.
It's I took it well, like I said, I had like quite an optimistic reading overall, like as a catharsis, like going through a trauma. She went through at least in my reading of this, like she went through,
and
a
every day
event.
She relives the dream / nightmare of the guilt and the
but the very final and then because they have the same actor that played the abuser that plays like her like publicist or whoever he is, and so
that's a reflection of
of her not being able to move on from the abuse,
but also mistrust on other people,
exactly. And they use the same actor, to make that like in my first watch confusing and my second watch clear what he was trying to do with that. And then the final for me, like on my second watch, like the final shot with the conjoined, like them as conjoined twins, was exactly as you say, that she accepted. She was, in my opinion, she was able to accept.
It's not gone, but it's a part of her and not a part she resents.
But she's like,
and a part that she shows as well. She walks out into the world.
Yeah, she steps out of the house, and from what I recall, it's sunlight as well. I think it's the only time there's sunlight in that film, what I can remember.
Yeah.
So it was the most like impenetrable for me on the first watch. The most rich overall.
Yeah, it's definitely the most artistic and creatively challenging. I would guess.
Yeah,
like it's not the kind of movie that you absently watch. You kind of have to look for meaning. It's not handed to you. Yeah, in a David Lynch kind of manner. Like I don't know whether you've seen David Lynch movies.
You started watching Twin Peaks.
I'm about
Twin
7
Peaks.
episodes into Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
At the moment. Yeah,
and it's that kind of style. It's kind of like challenging media that doesn't feed you a story. You have to look for what the story is telling you. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well,
I think this last segment elevates this for me to the point of.
Well then, Mike, which is your favorite overall?
Well, I think it's pretty clear from everything I've said. But yeah, it's Takeshi Miike's Box, then Fruit Chan's Dumplings, then Cut by Park Chan-wook.
Yeah. Cool. Dave?
I put Dumplings number 1.
Okay.
Then
fair enough.
Then Box, then Cut. Although my first watch had Cut at number 1. Like I said, on my second watch, of Cut, like I did pick up on a bit more subtext, like I said, about like the vampire representing his wife and stuff, but it's still the kind of thinnest of the three, and on a second watch, I was like, skip.
I felt kind of the same about Cut. I think when the first time I watched it was probably like 14 or something.
Yeah.
But I think at the time, I think I still preferred Box, but I didn't really. I thought Dumpling was kind of like a strung out idea and liked Cut more. But on second watch, I think you're right. Cut has, once you know the resolution, I think it's a lot less of it takes the kind of guessing game out of it and it makes it a weaker.
Yeah, again, it's not to say that there's no substance.
It's definitely got substance, and it's not bad.
And there are things to talk about, and we have talked about them.
Yeah.
But I think of the three, it's, the one that probably makes the greatest first impression.
But it's not a leaving impression.
Yeah.
Well, it is a leaving impression visually, but it's not one that's
yeah. Well, I mean, it needs to get points for that. It needs to get credit for having the most striking and memorable image of the entire sequence of 3 films.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was my second watch that solidified it, because it took my second watch to understand the final story. And I think on balance, like the mix between a slightly simpler story for me to understand, but with a lot of depth in Dumplings, a very simple story to kind of just engage you on a first watch with Cut, and then an incredibly deep and complex and very challenging third story, which I didn't understand on the first watch, and so what I said before, Dumplings, Box.
Cut. Well, I'm going to go number 1, Box. Number 2, Cut, and Dumplings at 3.
All right. What's your? Have you got a specific problem with Dumplings?
I don't have a problem with Dumplings. I think it's really good. I
just think it's
the other two. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even think it's weak. I just like the other two a bit more. There's no.
Yeah.
It's a bit like coming out with a song like "Let It Be," but the other two songs are like other two songs are like
Hey
My
Jude.
Generation and Yesterday.
Whoa, you're mixing bands. What the fuck?
One of them just isn't the Beatles, but yeah.
So it gets number 3, but it is still really great. I think Dumplings is down there because perhaps it's not artistically. I don't think the message is as on point as it could be now, because I think the substance has done it better, and I think that by a female director was important, and I reckon a male director diluted that message a little bit, so that takes the bottom spot for me because of that. I think the performances are fantastic, and I think the actual direction at points and the eating of the dumplings is really brilliant as well. I just found it lost its steam for me a little bit at times. Cut would have probably been number 1 had it not been for that ending. I really enjoyed Cut. I liked its simplicity. I know you're saying actually about it not having that many legs to stand on at the end of it, but sometimes I like a nice simple story with a striking image. And that's what it gave to me until the ending, where it tried to be something more than it is. And if it is what it is, then I'm happy. If it tries to do something that and not keep ambiguous, then you've just kind of lost me a little bit and left me with a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth, which is a shame because I really enjoyed it for the most part.
Yeah, the graduate style ending I think would have been better. I do. To be honest, I do wonder if my opinion of Cut was harmed by my watching them twice so close together.
Yeah,
because I think it makes me appreciate second deeper stories.
Well, there's a lot more to digest with the other two.
Yeah. If I just watched it once, or if I spaced out my watches, once every couple of years or something, I think maybe I'd Cut a lot more.
And so then Box takes my top spot because of its complexity, its beauty, its imagery. The cinematography in it is incredible. I like the use of the real world elements. I enjoy that I can go back to it and discover more about it each time I watch it and uncover a bit more of what it's trying to say. I reckon it's keeping itself. You can look at it in many different ways. You can interpret that differently. And I enjoy a piece of media that can do that for me. That's a film that can make me rethink my interpretation when I go back to it again and reveal more of its secrets is a special one. And it is quite simplistic in many respects, but it's the complexity of the human mind.
It's like a beautiful puzzle box, isn't it? It's like if you literally recorded someone's dream.
and there's that idea of her feeling that guilt, but also the abuse that has been bestowed. What's the word?
Bestowed.
Bestowed, yeah. The abuse that's been bestowed on the sisters, and that led them to that point. That really, it's not her fault. It's the idea of they were abused. All of that complexity, and then to put it in such a beautiful way, and how they've put that on screen, incredible. So yeah, that takes top spot. But I reckon these 3 films have led to some very dark, interesting conversations for what we've had tonight. And I think that's something that you don't necessarily always get with a Western cinema piece. So this is interesting to experience this.
The shared theme between them is basically the one thing they share is morality.
Yeah.
And how that reflects upon.
And they're not bound by the rules of Western society. They can do different things. They can go different ways. And they can bring up issues that are perhaps more taboo in Western culture that perhaps they're calling out in Eastern culture.
Yeah.
There's a lot in there. And the fact that our conversations are able to go down paths that they have, I mean, that they've done their job, right? The fact that we're talking about them in such ways and we're able to link them in with real world elements in the way we have, just I think goes to show their beauty and the fact that they've all managed to succeed.
Yeah, universally as well, when we don't belong to that culture.
Yeah.
And also we're 20 years off from
Yeah. It shows that with all the advancement of technology, we're still animals.
Yeah, man.
These prehistoric
meat bags
things
walking around
with thoughts and Yeah. All right. Yeah. Anything more?
I look forward to covering more J horror and K horror.
Actually, I wanted to ask then, for myself and anyone else out there, just 1 or 2 recommendations. What might you watch? If you enjoyed this, what would you say?
I mean, yeah, if you want more Takashi Miike stuff, Itchy the Killer is great.
That's not
very much the same. Yeah, Jesus. I mean, Audition is obviously a good choice for Takashi Miike. Have you seen Visitor Q?
No, you've told me about it.
That's really good as well. I recommend that.
Yeah.
Obviously, Chan-wook Park. You got your Vengeance trilogy. Anything by him is worthy of a watch. I haven't seen anything else by Fruit Chan because he's not really a primarily Western distributed or horror director. But if you want J horror or K horror in general, you can't go wrong with the most famous stuff. Like, you got to watch the Grudge. You got to watch Ringu. Shutter.
Well, I reckon that's a good
everything's
springboard.
all good.
I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't overthink it. I think what you thought there is fantastic. So yeah, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
No worries. Let us know what you think. Controversial. Comment. Let us know and like, share, subscribe.
Yeah, give us your rating of the 3.
Yeah, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.